radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 142, recorded on Friday, February 7th from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, we discuss the life and career of Shirley Chisholm, the first black woman in Congress and to run for president.
But first, and I know we said we're not going to do headlines every week, which maybe we won't do. I don't know. We're kind of learning as we go here, but we have to talk about Elon Musk and the Zoomer boys.
Oh, no.
And their takeover of the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, I would call it a takeover.
They have already shut down USAID. They are going after the Department of Labor.
But that's just run by globalists, though, Jason.
Right.
You need to understand this.
And the thing is, AID is not all great. Like, it's a lot of secret funding to, like, overthrow governments and CIA funding under the table. So I'm not 100% on board, but no one gave Elon Musk the power to do this.
Yep.
And it is absolutely ridiculous. They've have a server attached in the Department of Treasury that has access to every single American citizen's personal information. It is tracking every single transaction of our multi-trillion-dollar budget. And there is no constitutional basis for this. This is just a unilateral power grab by one of the world's most wealthy men and could potentially be stealing billions of dollars that we would never know. And he is now in complete oversight of the very departments that are meant to be regulating him and his businesses.
Yep.
And the thing is, we said all of this before the election, and Donald Trump still won. So I almost don't even care for all the people that are freaking out. Like, yeah, I know. We knew this was going to happen.
I'm just depressed.
Like, the details maybe not exactly, but we knew that specifically Elon Musk was going to be a problem. We talked about the fact that, he's being sued by all these governmental agencies, and this is why he's spending hundreds of millions of dollars to get Donald Trump reelected so that he can be part of the government and use his influence to benefit himself. Which, I mean, Trump's certainly no stranger to that. That is exactly why he wants to be president again as well.
Well, okay, Jason, hear me out, though. I get that careening off the cliff to one of the most corrupt oligarchies our country has ever seen may be bad.
Oligarchy. One of my favorite, yes.
But did you see how Trump said he's going to ban paper straws?
Yeah. Overturn
We're going back to plastic, baby.
The imaginary Joe Biden mandate for plastic straws that never existed. And that comes days after the report that microplastics are in all of our brains. So yeah, plastic is back. Thanks, dipshit. And yes, if you hadn't heard, and you should, if you don't know what we're talking about with this Elon Musk thing, you really need to look up the story. It's not going to be our topic today, so we're not going to go too in depth on it. But essentially, there is a gang of teenage and early 20s Zoomers that are software engineers employed by Elon Musk. I think they mostly come from Twitter and SpaceX, and they are rummaging through every government department. It's increasing every day. I believe they're going through NOAA currently. Like I said, the Department of Labor, the Treasury Department, USAID, and grabbing access to all of the systems and even shutting departments down, firing people, doing things that only Congress is authorized to do. And so far, 2 of them have been found to be, wow, what a big surprise working for Elon Musk, horrible racists. One of which resigned when his recent, within the last 8 months, racist posts came to light. And Elon Musk, of course, announced to everyone today that he will be back. Because it's not fair to judge someone based on their worst posts.
I mean, he didn't say anything too bad, though. I mean, it was just normalize Indian hate, wanting to overturn the Civil Rights Act. What else did he do? Oh, yeah. He also wanted eugenically based immigration policy.
Right, racism and eugenics, nothing that unusual, just more Nazi shit. I mean, Elon Musk literally hailed behind the seal of the President of the United States. So it's all good. So I would recommend, even if you're in the same situation that I am, your representatives, hardcore mega Republican, still contact them, contact their office, let them know, politics aside, you don't agree with this say, like, you believe in the Constitution, and you do not believe that this action being taken by, again, the world's richest man is constitutional. He's unelected. He doesn't answer to anyone. This should not be taking place. It's undemocratic. It's unconstitutional. It's un-American. However you want to phrase that. Let them know that, you're not happy about this. I don't know what else to do. I mean, you could try to get Elon Musk's assassination coordinates.
Jesus.
Remember from the
Twitter, yeah.
Right, the account that he shut down because they were posting the public information on his flight paths. Otherwise, I don't know what you can do. He has the full support of the government, and yes, there are lawsuits already being filed because of this, but do you think the Supreme Court's really going to uphold the Constitution in this instance when it's not in their best interests? No, I don't either. So with all that said, we're going to go into our main topic today. And this is a weird one for me because as part of our new format, you're the one that did all of the research.
I did.
For this episode, and I am to remain the blank slate to kind of bounce off of here. I am just going in with my United States public school education, which is to say, I don't know if I've ever even heard of this person before.
I was going to say, that's a low bar.
Right.
So, let's do this. Let's jump on in.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Well, it is officially Black History Month, and we want to do some things for Black History as we do every year.
Well, most years, since we thought of this like 2 years ago.
Good point. But we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And I came across the story of Shirley Chisholm. And I'm going to be honest, Jason, the more I looked into the story, the angrier I got that I have not heard about this before. Shirley Chisholm is a badass. Just straight up. I have never even heard about this person growing up before, which makes me very upset. But man, if Shirley was alive today, she would have terrified and have been hated by so many on the right today. And you'll get why, because I have clips of what she said back in the 1960s.
Well, just the fact that she's a black woman in Congress, even today, I think conservatives would not be too happy with
Correct.
That.
So I want to talk about this unabashed badass who stormed onto the political scene and made American history. Let's start with her early life. Shirley Chisholm was born Shirley Anita St. Hill on November 30th, 1924 in Brooklyn, New York. She was the child of immigrants. Her dad, Charles St. Hill, was a factory worker from Guyana. Her mom, Ruby Seal St. Hill, was a seamstress from Barbados.
Not in Trump's America.
Chisholm spent her early childhood in Barbados, actually, with her grandma so that her parents could work and save up money for a house and college education for their 4 daughters, which Shirley was the oldest of. She then returned to Brooklyn to finish high school in 1942 and then go on to graduate from Brooklyn College in 1946 in sociology.
So high school during World War II, that had to be interesting.
Right. And even there's like stories I couldn't really verify, but there were some other stories about how in college she even pushed for more black education classes, more women's studies programs. Super awesome stuff.
Mm-hmm. All of the things that today would be considered DEI woke bullshit.
Yeah, and get ready because there's going to be a lot of that supposed stuff throughout this entire episode, so get ready. Mm-hmm. She then went on to work in early education, serving as director for the Friends Day Nursery in Brooklyn, and then she continued to take graduate school classes, ultimately receiving her master's degree in early education from Columbia University in 1951. It was during this time she met and eventually married Conrad Chisholm, her husband.
Is that what happens when you marry someone?
What?
They become your husband?
Usually.
Okay.
Although I will also say she did later get divorced from Conrad and then married again, but I want to include that because that's where Shirley Chisholm gets her name. Chisholm was actively involved in her local Democratic group in the 50s and 60s. In 1964, she was elected to the New York State Legislature, and in 1968, a new redistricting created a brand new majority black and Latino congressional district, which obviously Chisholm was in. Chisholm was one of 3 candidates to run for the primary. Unfortunately, due to some disagreements, we'll say, with Stanley Steingut, a leader in the Brooklyn Democratic Party, about courting white voters in the district, Steingut and the local establishment backed Chisholm's opponent, State Senator William Thompson.
Something that you see all too often, especially even today with progressive candidates, where the larger Democratic Party tends to back the more centrist or moderate candidates.
Well, and I'd even go further, centrist, moderate, white man.
Right. I get in this context, I would say a little bit more than today, although it still does happen that way. But the establishment of the Democratic Party has not changed much in that regard.
Correct.
That they tend to always back, unfortunately, the more conservative candidates.
Correct. And get ready, that's going to be a theme of this entire episode. However, this is where residents began to see Chisholm's bold campaigning come to light. She worked tirelessly, canvassing all around the district. She would also drive around in a sound truck blasting, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is fighting Shirley Chisholm coming through."
Something you don't see much around here anymore, but I definitely saw when I was in Japan.
Oh, yeah?
They still do campaign that way with the trucks and the blaring.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand any of it, but they do that and they stand on street corners with loudspeakers.
All right, interesting. Shirley was also fluent in Spanish and was able to talk to the large Puerto Rican population directly, which gained her tons of more support. She also did a lot of work encouraging black voters to register to vote for the first time in many of their lives. Keep in mind, this is still only 1968. She ultimately won her primary by about 800 votes. So good.
Yeah, and that shows how much work is involved in these campaigns and how much effort and pounding the pavement you really have to put in.
Correct.
As a candidate. At least.
Like, she did it the correct way.
Right. At least that's what should happen.
Right.
But yeah.
In the general election, she went up against James Farmer, a black civil rights activist and leader who ran both as a candidate for the Republican and Liberal parties.
And also keep in mind, this is right around that switch where the Republican Party and the Democratic Party were kind of changing agendas.
Correct. However, it was also known that James Farmer was more conservative than Shirley Chisholm. Chisholm attacked Farmer for being an outsider because he was actually from Manhattan and not from the Brooklyn district. Since they agreed on many of the issues, Farmer decided to focus on Chisholm's gender. What a surprise! Arguing, quote, that women have been in the driver's seat in the black communities for far too long and that the district needed a man's voice in Washington, not that of a little school teacher. So great. Yeah. Chisholm kicked his ass by getting around 67% of the vote, and we never heard from that guy again. Screw him.
Little school yeah, the school teachers are not leaders in the community at all.
No, it's not. But by winning this race, she became the first black woman ever in Congress. All right. Now, as you can probably expect, Chisholm didn't have it easy while she was in Congress. In a 2003 interview on NPR's The Tavis Smiley Show, Chisholm said this about her experience while in the building.
I've always wanted to ask you about something you said years ago. The quote was, "Of my two handicaps, being female put more obstacles in my path than being black." Talk to me about that quote.
Oh, yes, that is quite true. Because after all, men are men. They're black men, white men, brown men. And for a long time, in terms of tradition, men have had a certain kind of attitude towards women in general. And I met far more discrimination being a woman than being black when I moved out in the political arena. All kinds of meetings and all kinds of groups got together in order to stop me from moving out because I was very outspoken, very articulate, and I didn't take any guff from anybody.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you whether or not you think that that is true, that sexism at that level is true in just the political environment, or you think across the board in America?
No, it's across the board. Because after all, men have placed women in a certain fashion. It's because of tradition through the years that the man is the most important being. No one is most important. They're stupid men and they're stupid women. And they're bright men and they're bright women. What one needs is the utilization of the talents of both of these persons coming from different genders in order to make the world work.
So male or female, just don't be stuck on stupid,
yes, that's right.
And that's well said. And honestly, what her opponent said in her general election to get into Congress about, well, we've been listening to
women for too long.
Black women in their communities for too long. This is in the 1960s. Women had only been allowed to vote for 40 years.
Yep.
So, yeah, I can definitely see, and especially in her community, the issue of her being a woman is much bigger of a hindrance than being black. And that's unfortunate. Any kind of discrimination is unfortunate. And as she said, it is wrong-headed because you need those different perspectives, which is really what DEI is all about, and we are currently outlawing it in this country, and it will be to all of our detriment.
Well, and this was actually one of the things that I loved the most about learning about Shirley Chisholm's story. It was that she was, as you can tell, very blunt and unafraid to talk about not even just the issues that like conservative white supremacists and idiots would talk about all day long. Like, she already knew about that, but she was very eager to talk about the rampant sexism in the Democratic Party and rampant sexism of her own black colleagues, which we'll also get to.
And being that well-spoken at 79 years old as well, it's pretty rare. And that's, 20 years ago.
And we'll get to that too, trust me. The issues began for Chisholm right away when she was initially assigned to the House Agriculture Committee. As you can probably guess, Jason, there isn't a lot of agriculture that's happening in the heart of Brooklyn.
What do you mean?
Get right.
It's not too many farmers in her district?
She said in response to this, quote, apparently all they know in Washington about Brooklyn was that one tree grew there once. So she called up her leadership and demanded to be put on a different committee. And she was eventually put onto the Veterans Affairs Committee, saying, there are a lot more veterans than trees in my district. Within 3 years, she moved to the Education and Labor Committee and became a leader on that as well. Now, Chisholm was extremely active and vocal in Congress, like I said before. In her first speech on the floor in 1969, she gave a passionate rebuke of the Vietnam War. And forgive me in advance because we're going to do some reading of her speeches, but they're super awesome and I just want to share them with you.
And I instructed Joe not to do a voice.
Why would I do a voice? Don't you do that to me. Don't you put that on me.
He was so eager to do a voice, and I was like, no, this isn't appropriate.
Jesus Christ. Damn it.
Yeah, now try not to do one.
I know. Now, I am not a pacifist. I am deeply, unalterably opposed to this war in Vietnam, apart from all the other considerations, and there are many. The main fact is that we cannot squander their lives, the money, the energy that we desperately need here in our cities and in our schools. We Americans have come to feel that it is our mission to make the world free. We believe that we are the good guys everywhere. In Vietnam, in Latin America, wherever we go. We believe we are the good guys at home too. When the Kerner Commission told white America what black America has always known, that prejudice and hatred built the nation's slums, maintains them, and profits by them, white America would not believe it. But it is true. Unless we start to fight and defeat the enemies of poverty and racism in our own country and make our talk of equality and opportunity ring true, we are exposed as hypocrites in the eyes of the world when we talk about making other people free.
A sentiment that still rings true today.
Fully on board with that message. Again.
And nothing has changed, unfortunately.
Correct. And just speaking all the truth. I have another one for you. In 1970, she gave another famous speech on the floor in support of the Equal Rights Amendment, where she said, quote, the argument that this amendment will not solve the problem of sex discrimination is not relevant. If the argument were used against the Civil Rights Bill, as it has been used in the past, the prejudice that lies behind it would be embarrassing. Of course, laws will not eliminate prejudice from the hearts of human beings, but that is no reason to allow prejudice to continue to be enshrined in our laws, to perpetuate injustice through inaction. She continued on to say, the time is clearly now to put this House on record for the fullest expression of that equality and opportunity which our founding fathers professed. They professed it, but they sure did not assure it to their daughters as they tried to do for their sons. The Constitution, they wrote, was designed to protect the rights of white male citizens, as there were no black founding fathers. There were no founding mothers. A great pity on both counts. It is not too late to complete the work they left undone. Today, here, we should start to do so.
That is a very powerful sentiment and one that I had not heard before, but I will repeat as if I came up with from now on.
Jesus Christ. But again, I'm imagining right now, this would never be said today.
No, you would be
on the floor.
Yeah, they'd be,
and she said
woke.
And she said it in 1970.
Right. Just that phrase, there were no black founding fathers and no founding mothers. A pity on both accounts. That in and of itself is a very powerful statement.
Completely agree. And that's where we get very angry talking about Trump's 1776 commission, which tries to erase this.
Right. Well, and everything about Trump's entire second administration is just, we need to make the country safe for white Christian straight men. That is the entire, and also, of course, steal as much money from the government as we possibly can, because we know this is our last shot at it. But the reason he got people to vote for him is by stoking fear and anger from white Christian men that they are somehow being oppressed, even though they are in every hall of power overrepresented. But somehow they are sold that they are being oppressed and that they have to stand up for themselves and take back what is rightfully theirs.
Which is literally the racist state that came before this.
It is literally white privilege.
Yes.
That they need to restore white privilege, make white privilege great again. That is the second Trump administration, and he won. He won the election for the presidency of the United States based on that message and is fulfilling it.
Correct. So, just to quickly recap, Shirley Chisholm, super progressive, anti-Vietnam War, as what many right-wingers today would call hyper woke, super into DEI, the whole thing.
She would be the AOC, like basically the same thing, where she would be considered a superstar on the left and like constantly vilified on the right.
Yes, but she wasn't done there. She then served on the Rules Committee, becoming the first black woman and only the second woman ever to serve on one of Congress's most powerful committees. She was a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Women's Caucus. And throughout her time, she prioritized labor and education, pushing for more funding for public schools and overnight child care centers. She opposed President Richard Nixon's guaranteed minimum annual income for families, arguing that the plan's proposed income was not adequate to meet the needs of a family, nor did the legislation provide, quote, daycare, job training, and job development which would be necessary if the family assistance plan would work.
And things that we still don't have today.
Correct. She was a leading proponent to amend the Fair Labor Standards Act to increase the minimum wage and brought domestic workers, which were predominantly made up of women of color, under minimum wage protections. And she was successful in adding an amendment to our national school lunch bill, increasing eligibility for families of reduced lunch all throughout the country.
Mm-hmm. And prioritize labor and education, two departments that are currently under attack.
Yep. Again, re-emphasizing.
And you
Badass.
said, that one of those speeches was in support of the Equal Rights Amendment, something that's been debated in the 50 years since and has never come to pass.
Correct.
And we still do not have an Equal Rights Amendment, and now is basically impossible. With the way our government works, I don't see there ever being another constitutional amendment. There's just no way. It's too divided. Anything that is proposed, I can't see anything, honestly, that would be positive coming from the Republicans, because they seem to just be a negative party currently. But anything that is proposed from Democrats, I think the things that I would think would have the most broad appeal for everyone would be environmental stuff. I mean, we're literally burning the planet alive.
Sure.
As we speak. We just talked about Trump gleefully created an executive order in support of plastic fucking straws. That's where we are with the Republic. Do you think any constitutional amendment, no matter how broad its appeal would be, like, there's no way.
Right.
They'll support it. Anything that Democrats support is woke DEI nonsense or wasteful government spending.
But now that brings us to what really pushed Shirley Chisholm into the spotlight. In January of 1972, Shirley Chisholm declared her candidacy for President of the United States. And I want to share her opening line from her announcement speech with you.
I am not the candidate of Black America, although I am Black and proud. I am not the candidate of the women's movement of this country, although I am a woman, and I'm equally proud of that. I am not the candidate of any political bosses or fat cats or special interests. I stand here now without endorsements from many big-name politicians or celebrities or any other kind of prop. I do not intend to offer to you the tired and glib cliches which for too long have been an accepted part of our political life. I am the candidate of the people of America.
Oh, what a world we could live in if she had any chance of winning the presidency in 1972. I now pine for that world.
You're going to pine for more after you hear more of what she's done and said. So no gimmicks, no frills, straight up progressive policies and unabashed pride in who she is. Love it. She also ran under the slogan, Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed, just succinctly clarifying what we just heard in that clip. Now, for a little bit of context of this race, keep in mind, this was still in the wake of the DNC protests in 1968. I don't know if you remember that. These were the ones that happened in Chicago.
This is what everyone kept bringing up when Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden and the talk of there being some sort of contention.
Yeah, there's going to be a second Chicago 1968 protest.
Which, of course, it never came to fruition. And, I mean, unfortunately, we know where we are today, but that's what everyone was worried about.
There were 13 total candidates in this Democratic primary. There were 13 total candidates in this Democratic primary, which included several notables. Hubert Humphrey, who lost to Nixon in 1968, and he's trying again. George Wallace, the famous racist and segregationist, who said, segregation now, segregation forever. John Lindsay, whose campaign actually never got off the ground, but I kept him in here just because Chisholm was beating him in all the polls, and he kept asking her to drop out because he didn't want to be seen as losing to a woman, which I thought was hilarious. And finally, George McGovern, the ultimate winner of the primary and the ultimate loser to Nixon. It should also be known, too, that McGovern was also seen as a progressive anti-Vietnam War candidate, and it was difficult for Shirley Chisholm to actually get a lot of policy differences between her and McGovern when they agreed a lot on the war.
Mm-hmm. And something you still see today, everyone trying to carve out their own lane in a primary. And if you're too closely aligned with someone else,
good luck.
Yeah, it can be hard to separate yourself from them.
Right. Unfortunately, yet predictably, Chisholm's candidacy was not taken seriously. The Congressional Black Caucus was split over their support because they thought it'd be better to support McGovern because he had a better shot at winning the general. There it is.
And again, still something you see today. You saw that a lot in 2016. Bernie Sanders versus
Hillary Clinton. You saw it in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with ultimately everyone coalescing behind Joe Biden.
Correct. Now, obviously, she had something to say about this. So I'm going to play a few clips for you. I also want to apologize because for two of them, I could only find them in the documentary Chisholm 72 Unbought and Unbossed. There's some music at the beginning and end of these clips, and some go through it. I couldn't get them out of the clip, so I apologize, but these clips are just too good to leave out, so I just wanted to still include them and then just give my full support and recommendation. I saw it in researching this episode. Watch that documentary. It's very, very good. So let's go to the clips. The first clips are from press conferences recorded by both the AP and CBS.
Now, I realize that this is a rough road, but a catalyst for change in a society is usually persona non grata with those who have been the beneficiaries of the system. A catalyst for change has to be able to withstand the insults, the humiliations, the abuses, and the slurs. What's wrong with my running for president of this country? After all, for 15 years, I have been the ghostwriter for a lot of them.
One of the most active candidates of Campaign 72 is Shirley Chisholm of Brooklyn. She bristles at the suggestion she step aside, lest she draw liberal votes away from other Democratic presidential contenders.
Why is it constantly, quadriennially, when politicians come out from every corner to get the most important thing, you have your vote? Why is it that it has to always be white males, white males, white males, white males, white males? So, ladies and gentlemen, I conclude by saying, if you can't support me, or you can't endorse me, get out of my way. You do your thing, and let me do mine.
I absolutely love
white males. Yeah. Still, obviously.
Again, I'm telling you, the more you listen to her, the more you're going to love her.
Well, and it's invigorating to hear those words. It's depressing that they're still relevant.
Right, exactly.
50 years later.
And I loved, again, going back to how she's just happy to call out the people who are standing in her way in the democratic process and say, if you don't like what I'm doing, then just get out of my way.
Right.
I don't have time for you. Like, I love it so much.
Yeah, and it's, we try to understand and we try to project that dumping the Democratic Party is not a way to political power. And I do believe that still. That's almost the impetus for our entire show when we were first constructing this, was literally in the campaign of Joe Biden, when everyone was like, I can't believe Joe Biden's the shitty candidate. I'm not going to vote, and we're like, wait. We don't want a second Trump presidency, unfortunately, where we are 4 years later. Like, you're going to have to hold your nose.
And just suck it up.
Right. And so I get that fact, and I still say yes, when it comes down to the current Republican Party and where they are, I mean, you just look at the executive orders, it's a fucking joke. That compared to anything, I don't care how centrist, how moderate, how beholden to corporate interests the Democratic candidate is going to be, they're still the better choice. But it's hard to hear that the same problems that were going on in the 1970s with the Democratic Party and their reluctance to embrace a progressive candidate are still going on today when we
50
think
years later.
We just got to get through, once the Joe Bidens and the Chuck Schumers and the Nancy Pelosi's die off, then we'll be all right.
It's going to keep happening.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to do a little bit more.
Right, I completely agree. And now for the second clip that came from a rally where she attacks the idea that women shouldn't run at all.
For over 15 years of my life, my brain power has been utilized. And yet, not when the professional politicians, but when the people said, we want Shirley Chisholm to move out for Congress. These same politicians whom I helped to keep put together in order for them to be acceptable to the public had the nerve to get together and say, we don't want to put her in because she is a woman, but we will represent the women. We don't need anybody to represent us. We have people in this country that have the brain power and the ability to move out.
I want like that on a shirt saying, we don't need anybody to represent us. Like, that's one of my favorite clips of her. It's like, we don't want her to, be in politics. We don't want her to be a president or anything like that. It's okay. Men will still represent women here. We don't need anybody to represent you. Mm-hmm. Get out of here. Like, I loved it so much. Like, it chills.
We're still doing that too.
Yes.
Right? Like, again, the whole push for DEI is literally...
let the white man represent you.
Right. We don't need the workforce and management and Congress to look like the broader community. It's fine that it's 95% majority white.
Correct.
That there's no problem with that. And any attempts to try to make it more representative of the actual state of the country are illegal.
Because they're just seen as a burden that should be
it's seen as like unearned.
Yes. And to make things even more challenging, she was then turned away from the presidential debates, even though candidates she was beating in the polls were invited. So her campaign actually ended up suing those TV companies, and the FEC ruled that she deserved equal time as other candidates, which she did do. I don't have the audio for this one, but it's in the documentary. I recommend it. Watch the documentary. It's very good. But there's this interesting clip from a presidential forum where she was, again, by court order, allowed to be in the same room as McGovern and Humphrey. And the only thing she was asked about was if she were to drop out, who would she support, McGovern or Humphrey? And she had to keep saying, I'm running for president. So, okay, well, would you want to be vice president? I'm running for president.
Right. It definitely reminds me of Nikki Haley and her being asked over and over and over again if she would support Donald Trump.
Right. She didn't stop, though. She was ultimately endorsed by numerous black and women leaders all throughout the country, as well as the Black Panther Party, which prompted many journalists to ask her if she thought that was damaging, because Black Panthers were a scary group. And again, Jason, you're going to love this.
T'Challa's a scary guy.
Yeah. Well, and Jason, you're going to love this. Not only did she never reject their endorsement, when people asked her about the Black Panthers endorsement, she asked them back why the Black Panthers had to exist even in the first place, and think about that first. And then praised the Black Panthers for getting involved with voter registration efforts of black voters.
Mm-hmm. Something that is still sorely needed.
So, again, just go get them.
Very much Stacey Abrams energy.
Yep.
On that.
That brings us to the Democratic National Convention. Obviously, like I said before, spoilers, she lost. However, she did receive 152 delegates at the convention, which is about 10% of the total delegates given. I also found that a 1974 Gallup poll listed her as one of the top most admired women in America, ahead of Jackie Kennedy and Coretta Scott King, and tied with the Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi for 6th place. So she was well known.
Despite her not being so well known today.
Right.
I wonder why that is. I've heard of Jackie Kennedy.
Yep. Chisholm retired from Congress in 1983, but she still wasn't done. She co-founded the National Political Congress of Black Women. She also campaigned for Jesse Jackson's bid for president in 1984 and 1988.
And I'm old enough to remember both of those.
There you go. Cool. She also taught at Mount Holyoke College as a chair of her department, and in 1990 she helped form the group African American Women for Reproductive Freedom.
Again, another group that is sorely needed today.
She then traveled across the country to over 150 campuses, by her count at least, giving lectures where she said stuff like this.
These children are our future. And it is important for women to move out in the political area of this country on the city level, the statewide level, and on the national level. Not because we hate men, as people sometimes want to say. It's not a question of hating men at all. It is a question of recognizing that in the term of human events and the course of circumstances in this nation, that unless women who are the natural instructors of the young have the opportunity to sit in these legislative bodies and speak about the child care centers, speak about the importance of a child having 3 glasses of milk a day, speak about the fact that it is necessary for children in Appalachia and in the South to get that hot lunch because it perhaps is the only meal that they can get. Speak about the fact that there's a need for daycare centers, not because of some socialistic concept, as some of these Neanderthal gentlemen talk about when they stand in the well of the House of Representatives. The fact is that 60% of the American women today are working. Women who have children between the ages of 5 and 15. And they're not working in order to acquire some kind of luxuries. They're working because many of them are the sole parent in the household. They're working because in so many instances the husbands and the fathers are not earning enough money in order to take care of the basic necessities of life, food, shelter, and clothing. And in order to do this, they need to have places where their children can be cared for intellectually, psychologically, physically, and educationally. And that is what child care centers are about.
Yeah. Well said. Still very relevant.
Yeah, I know it. I just, again, the line of, and it's not because of some socialistic agenda or anything like that. Like these Neanderthal men in Congress try to say it. I'm like,
you could put that line behind so much today. And it's still when it comes to daycare, school lunches for kids, like still relevant.
Still very relevant. In 1993, Bill Clinton nominated her as the U.S. ambassador to Jamaica, but she declined due to health concerns. That same year, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. She continued to give talks and write until her passing in 2005.
Which makes it all the more concerning that we have not heard. I went to school a long time before 2005, where she was still alive.
Yep. And I'm going to be honest, man, like I've heard her interviews and like some of her lectures from the early 2000s. It's still like she's on the ball.
Yeah, she was still sharp.
She's still talking about education policy and black equality in the 2000s. Like she was still on it. Like, how have I not heard about her?
Right.
And then in 2015, President Obama posthumously awarded Shirley Chisholm the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Unfortunate that it had to be posthumously.
Right. And that basically brings us to the end of our story. Like I said before, please check out the resources listed in our show notes, especially the Chisholm 72 Unbought and Unbossed documentary. It's really, really good. A lot of those resources I'll list also includes further readings themselves. I'll also include the entirety of some of those speeches that we referenced and clipped earlier today. And actually just last year, Netflix released a movie about Chisholm and her campaign for the president called Shirley. So I actually haven't seen it yet, but now I plan on doing so because I'm just now a big fan apparently. So that's it for our episode. Jason, I hope you learned something.
I did.
And I hope
everyone learned something.
Well, I hope everyone learned something too. And I hope that you can learn about this, again, 100% pure badass, and hopefully have some hope that we can have people like this in our era today.
And this is what you should be looking for in local candidates that you want to support. Look for this type of spirit, this type of energy, focus on the people, not worrying about special interests and who can grant them the power, and just worried about what is needed in your community.
Right. I think my biggest takeaway is just don't be scared. You see so many people who are just terrified to be leaders in their own communities, and they're terrified to take stances on anything.
Right. We started this biography, essentially her political career. She was actively involved in her local Democratic groups in the 50s and 60s. That's how it started. That's how it can start for you.
Yeah, so just don't be afraid and get involved. So before we go, we'll leave you with one more Shirley Chisholm clip, and it's her closing remarks to that same speech you just heard from 1983 in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Enjoy.
We've really come too far to again be danced backwards into what others consider to be our place. Our place here and now is in America's mainstream, in the upper, swifter currents of the mainstream, where we can assume greater responsibilities and collect the greater rewards that we are due. And don't let anybody tell you that you're out on the limb. The time has come in America, and all of us can no longer be the passive, complacent, armchair recipients of whatever the morals or the politics of our nation may decree for us. But that if we have the courage of our convictions, we will stand up and be counted. Nobody talks about you if you're not doing anything, so don't worry about it if they're talking about you. Forget conventionalisms. Forget what the world will say, whether you're in your place or out of your place. You do your thing, looking only to God, whoever your God is, and to your conscience for approval. And together we will march, and you know something, if we are able to do that, together we will overcome. Thank you.
We don't have many communicators.
I was
like
just say,
that.
like as someone who's also like studied like orators and things like that, like why haven't I heard about her before? She's so good,
Right.
And she has a lisp, and I'm like, she's communicating like this with a lisp, and she's still like one of the best communicators I've ever heard. I'm like, I don't really get like fired up from a speech anymore. I just don't. But listening to her, I'm like, holy fucking shit! Like, let's fucking go.